There are sounds that can shatter a man's soul in seconds, and I had just heard mine. The voice of my eldest son, Edward, whispering on the phone in the hallway of my own home, planning how to put me in a nursing home to get his hands on my fortune. The old man's losing it. Mom's not around to protect him anymore. It's the perfect time, he said with a coldness that froze my blood. My name is Robert Miller. I'm 50 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed I'd built a solid family. Now, hiding behind my study door, my heart pounding like a war drum, I discovered that the only enemies who truly matter live under my own roof. The conversation continued. Edward was talking to his younger sister, Patricia, coordinating the details like it was a military operation. I've already contacted Dr. Evans. He says with his signature and mine, we can declare him incompetent. Patricia, you handle the bank papers, I'll handle the nursing home. My hands trembled. Dr. Evans, the same doctor who had treated Mary, my wife, during her battle with cancer, the same man I had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for treatments that in the end couldn't save her. Now that same doctor was willing to sign my social death warrant for money. And what if he fights it? Patricia asked with a voice I didn't recognize. The little girl I used to cradle in my arms during thunderstorms now sounded like a stranger calculating my destruction. He can't do anything. Once he's committed, we'll have full legal power over his accounts. $25 million, Patricia. $25 million that we could be wasting while he's still alive, spending our inheritance on his whims. $25 million. The exact figure of my net worth, calculated down to the last cent. They'd done their homework. They had studied every investment, every bank account, every property I had built with decades of 18-hour days. The money I had saved, thinking of their future, was now the reason for my condemnation. I slid silently back to my desk. On it, photos of my children at their graduations looked at me with smiles that now seemed like masks. Edward receiving his law degree, fully funded by me. Patricia with her business diploma, every semester paid for with my sweat. Their successes, built on my sacrifices, were now the weapons they would use to destroy me. Edward's voice was getting closer. Tomorrow night after dinner, we'll tell him it's just a routine checkup. Once he's inside, Patricia, he's not coming out. His footsteps moved away toward the kitchen. I remained motionless for several minutes, processing the sheer scale of the betrayal. It wasn't just the money, it was the meticulous planning, the coldness with which they had designed my disappearance. It was the fact that they had been building this plan for weeks, maybe months, while I kept treating them like the children I thought they were. Mary. If my wife were alive, this never would have happened. She knew our children better than I did. She had always noticed certain signs that I, blinded by paternal love, had ignored. Edward is so ambitious, Robert, she had told me once, and Patricia is always calculating. I thought she meant those were their virtues. Now I understood it had been a warning. I walked to my study window. Outside, the garden Mary had designed was still blooming. The roses we planted together our first year of marriage were now growing wild without her loving care. Everything we had built together was falling apart without her, including our children. But something inside me hardened. I was not the decrepit old man they imagined. At 50, my mind was as sharp as ever, my body still strong, my business contacts intact. If they wanted to play dirty, I was going to show them who wrote the playbook. That night during dinner, I watched them as I never had before. Edward cut his steak with surgical precision, every movement calculated, just like his plans for my future. Patricia smiled as she told me about her job at the marketing firm, but her eyes avoided mine. They acted normal, perfectly, as if they hadn't been discussing my forced commitment hours earlier. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Patricia asked, and in that seemingly innocent question, I sensed the venom. She was sizing me up, looking for signs of weakness she could report to Dr. Evans. "Never felt better," I replied, holding her gaze until she looked away. "In fact, I'm thinking about making some big changes in my life." Edward's head shot up. "What kind of changes?" "Oh, nothing specific yet. Just rearranging some things." "Priorities." I let the word hang in the air like a time bomb. That night, when they went to their rooms, I stayed awake in my study until dawn, not planning my defense, but my offense, because I had decided something fundamental. If they wanted to bury me alive, I was going to make sure I was the one digging their graves first. The clock read 6 in the morning when I finally closed my eyes. In just a few hours, the most important operation of my life would begin. An operation that would change everything. An operation that would teach them that Robert Miller was nobody's victim, especially not his own children's. I woke up at 9 a.m. with a mental clarity I hadn't experienced in years. As I shaved in the bathroom mirror, I studied the lines on my face as if for the first time. 50 years old. Hair streaked with gray, but still thick. Green eyes that Mary used to say sparkled like emeralds when I was determined. Today, they were sparkling. My story wasn't that of an ordinary man. I was born dirt poor in a neighborhood on the rough side of town where hope was a luxury few could afford. At 12, while other kids were playing ball, I was selling gum at downtown traffic lights, not for kicks, for survival. Every dollar I earned was a dollar my family didn't have to borrow. The day that changed my life came when I was 14. Mr. Samuel Reed, owner of a small construction company, saw me fixing a bicycle on the street with makeshift tools. "Son," he said, "you've got smart hands. Want to work for me on weekends?" That job became my university. Mr. Reed taught me not just about construction, but about business, about how to treat people, about the importance of your word. When he died, he left me his company in his will. "Robert," his letter said, "you've worked harder than my own sons. This company is yours because you've earned it." At 24, I was an entrepreneur. The first 5 years nearly killed me. I worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, 7 days a week. I slept at the office more nights than I slept at home. I lived on coffee and sheer grit. It was during those tough years that I met Mary. She was a nurse at the hospital where I took one of my workers after an accident. She was beautiful, but not just physically. She had an inner light that lit up any room she entered, and by some miracle, she noticed a rough guy, all calloused hands and dirt under his nails. "Robert Miller," she told me the first time I asked her to dinner, "you're the hardest working man I've ever met, but also the most stubborn. If you want to win me over, you first have to learn to win some balance in your life." She was right. With her, I learned that success without love was just a gilded cage. We got married when I was 28. Edward arrived when I was 30, Patricia at 32. 2 babies who transformed a ruthless businessman into a completely vulnerable father. I remember holding Edward for the first time, looking at his tiny clenched fists and promising him that he'd never know poverty, that he'd never have to sell gum at traffic lights to help his family. Maybe that was my first mistake. By giving them everything I never had, I took away their chance to build the character that's forged in struggle. I gave them comfort where I'd had hunger, certainty where I'd had fear, privilege where I'd had to fight for every opportunity. I worked even harder. I wanted to build an empire that would guarantee their security for life. The company grew exponentially over the next 15 years. From construction, we expanded into real estate, then financial investments. Every success was another stone in the fortress I was building to protect my family. Mary watched me with concern. "Robert, you have enough money for 5 generations. When are you going to stop and just live?" "When I know they're completely safe," I'd answer. It was my excuse to keep working as if I were still that poor kid, terrified that poverty would return. The kids grew up surrounded by luxury, but also by my absence. Edward learned to walk while I was in a business meeting. Patricia said her first word while I was reviewing contracts. Mary compensated for my absence by being both mother and father. I'd show up at important moments with expensive gifts and promises of, "Next time, we'll spend more time together." Mary's diagnosis came when Edward was 20 and Patricia was 18. Ovarian cancer, advanced stage. For the first time in my adult life, all my money, all my contacts, all my power were useless. I couldn't buy more time. I couldn't bribe death. The last 2 years of Mary's life were the most precious and painful of my life. I left the company in the hands of managers to be with her. We traveled, we talked, we made peace with the lost time. She made me promise to take care of the kids. "Robert," she said in her final days, "our children have lived their whole lives in comfort. They don't know how to struggle. Promise me you won't spoil them any more than you already have." I promised. But when she died, the loneliness consumed me. I returned to work with more intensity than ever, and I gave Edward and Patricia everything they asked for. It was my way of honoring her memory, I thought. It was my way of making sure they never felt the emptiness I felt. Now, going down to breakfast, acting as if nothing had changed, I understood I had created two monsters. I had given them so much that they never learned to value anything. I had made life so easy for them that they never developed character. But I also understood something else. I was 50 years old, but the kid who sold gum at traffic lights was still alive inside me. And that kid knew how to fight. During breakfast, I watched them with this new perspective. Edward was checking his phone. Patricia arrived impeccably dressed. Their automatic smiles I now recognized as pure performance. "Good morning, Dad," they said in unison. But this morning their voices sounded different. Or maybe it was me who was hearing them differently. Every memory hit me like a wave. Edward at 5 crying because the other kids had cheaper toys, feeling different for having too much. Patricia at 7 manipulating Mary to get a pony. Every whim satisfied, every boundary ignored, every no that I turned into a yes out of guilt. I had tried to compensate for my lack of time with an excess of money. I had confused love with indulgence, but not anymore. After breakfast, when Edward and Patricia left for their jobs, I went up to my study and began the most important investigation of my life. If I was going to confront my own children, I needed cold, hard evidence of their betrayal. I called George Sloan, my accountant and friend of over 20 years. "Robert, I need to talk to you. It's urgent," he said when he answered. "What's wrong, George?" "I got a strange call yesterday, someone pretending to be your son, Edward, asking for detailed information about your bank accounts and properties. When I told him I needed your written authorization, he got very upset." "Robert, is everything okay?" The puzzle was starting to come together. "George, I need to see you this afternoon. And please, don't mention this conversation to anyone. Absolutely no one." George's office was on the 15th floor of a corporate high-rise in downtown Chicago. We spent 3 hours reviewing financial records that made me sick. There were 5 transactions I didn't remember authorizing, all for amounts between $50,000 and $150,000. There was also a fraudulent $2 million trust for a supposed grandchild who didn't exist. "Robert, according to my records, you authorized every one of these transactions personally," George explained. "I even have recordings of the phone calls." We listened to the 5 conversations. The voice was mine, no doubt. But as they played, I started to notice distorted words, as if they had been digitally edited. Someone had used voice cloning technology to create fake conversations. "George, these recordings are manipulated. Edward has hundreds of family videos with my voice. Patricia has access to all the calls from the house. Between the two of them, they had enough material to create a digital clone. How much money have they stolen in total? Between the unauthorized transactions and the fraudulent trust, approximately $2.8 million in the last 6 months. $2.8 million. They had been systematically stealing from me while planning to have me committed. It wasn't just greed. It was a sophisticated criminal operation. "There's something else," George said. 2 weeks ago, I received a request to prepare power of attorney documents for cases of mental incompetence, papers that would give Edward total control over all your finances. That afternoon, I drove to the Sunset Gardens nursing home, the place Edward had planned to put me. Director Peterson received me cordially. "Mr. Miller, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your son Edward has spoken so highly of you." "What exactly did he tell you?" "Well, he explained about your progressive cognitive decline, your tendency toward confusion, the episodes of aggression. He mentioned the incident where you attacked a housekeeper and another where you almost caused an accident driving in a confused state." Every word was a carefully constructed lie. I had never attacked anyone. I had never had an accident, but Edward had created a fake medical history so detailed it sounded completely credible. "Your son has already covered the first year's expenses, $15,000 a month. The special section for patients with advanced dementia is very quiet. The patients are comfortable and secure. Edward had paid $180,000 up front to secure my cell with my own stolen money. The tour of the facility froze my blood. Doors with electronic locks, barred windows, catatonic patients. Once I went in there, I would never come out. That night I returned home with enough evidence to destroy them, but I was hungry for more. I needed to understand the full scope of their conspiracy. I went quietly to Edward's study on the first floor. The spare key was still under the third rosebush Mary had planted, where it had always been. His desk revealed a folder marked Family Affairs, which contained a detailed analysis of my net worth and a forged psychological report. But the most revealing items were on his computer, emails between Edward, Patricia, and Lucas Cole, a lawyer specializing in mental incompetence. The emails dated back 4 months. Edward: LC, we need this process to be irreversible. Once he's committed, there can be no way for him to regain legal control. LC, with the psychological report we've prepared and Dr. Evans's testimony, any judge will sign the order. Once he's inside 72 hours. He's automatically considered incompetent. Patricia: and the assets? LC, with the power of attorney, you'll have total immediate control. You can liquidate investments, sell properties, close accounts. I kept reading. Each email was more nauseating than the last. Edward: what if he resists physically? LC, that's what the sedatives are for. Dr. Evans can administer medication to calm him during the exam. They plan to drug and kidnap me using medication. Patricia: how long do we estimate this whole process will last? LC: with the cognitive decline we're going to document, probably no more than 2 years. After that, you can move him to minimum care, much cheaper. Edward: minimum care? C: a place where he doesn't receive visitors, where no one questions his condition, basically where he can exist without interfering with your lives. They wanted to bury me alive, literally and figuratively. 2 years of conscious life in a medical hell, and then total abandonment until death. I printed all the emails and looked for more evidence. In the safe in my bedroom, using the combination that was my birthday, I found documents Mary had left. My wife had been investigating our children during the last months of her life. An audio recording labeled "For Robert, only if absolutely necessary" contained Mary's weak but determined voice. Robert, if you're hearing this, our children have betrayed you, just as I knew they would. They are not the people we raised, but I have a plan to stop them. The envelopes she had left contained contacts for private investigators and evidence that Edward had gambling debts of over $3 million and that Patricia had been embezzling money from her company. Mary had given me a full arsenal to defend myself. She had also given me something more valuable, confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. I was the victim of a criminal conspiracy planned by my own children, and tomorrow night, they planned to execute it. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in my study organizing all the evidence, Edward's emails, the forged documents, Mary's recording, the financial fraud. At 6 a.m., I called Ray Dawson, the private investigator Mary had contacted. "Mr. Miller," he said after reviewing the documents, "in 30 years on the job, I've never seen a case so well documented and so brutal. Your children didn't just plan to rob you, they planned to completely destroy your legal identity. What are my options? Legally, you have enough evidence to send them to prison for fraud, forgery, conspiracy to kidnap, and several other felonies. We're talking 10 to 15 years each. What's the alternative? Let them proceed with their plan until the last possible moment. We'll be filming them, recording every conversation. When it's time for the medical evaluation, we'll have hidden cameras capturing everything. Then, you disappear, voluntarily, leaving behind evidence that you knew about their plan all along." The idea was intriguing, but dangerous. What if they manage to drug me? We'll have people infiltrated. The moment they try to sedate you, we intervene. But by then, we'll already have video evidence of attempted kidnapping. I decided to go with the bolder plan. I spent the day preparing my complete disappearance. I discreetly liquidated $3 million in cash, modified my will to completely exclude Edward and Patricia, and packed a bag that I hid in the garage. At 2 in the afternoon, Patricia came to see me. Dad, after the doctor's appointment, maybe you should stay for observation at the clinic for a few days. Stay for observation? Yes, for a full evaluation. Edward and I are worried about leaving you here at home alone. The performance was perfect. She sounded genuinely concerned, but I had read her emails planning my permanent commitment. That afternoon, while Edward and Patricia were out running errands, I completed the final preparations. I transferred all my liquid assets to new accounts, copied important documents, and wrote 3 letters. One for the police, one for my lawyers, and one for Edward and Patricia. The letter to my children was the hardest. Edward and Patricia, I know everything. Every email, every fake document, every dollar stolen. I know what you plan to do to me tonight. When you read this letter, I will be long gone, along with every cent you hope to inherit. You have lost a father, an inheritance, and your freedom, because everything is documented and already in the hands of the authorities. Your father, who once loved you more than his own life. At 7 p.m., Edward and Patricia returned, all smiles. Ready for the doctor, Dad? Edward asked. Completely ready. In fact, I've never felt more prepared for anything in my life. Dr. Evans's office was in a modern medical building. During the entire drive, they kept up casual conversation, but I knew Ray and his team were already in position with hidden cameras. Dr. Evans's office was empty except for us. Mr. Miller, your children have told me so much about you, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure they have. He started with questions designed to establish mental decline. Have you noticed any changes in your memory, in your ability to make decisions? Doctor, I feel perfectly fine. My memory is intact and my mind is completely clear. Edward intervened immediately. Dad, yesterday you couldn't remember where you put your keys. Last week you were confused about what day it was. More lies, which Dr. Evans noted down carefully. Mr. Miller, paranoid accusations against family are a common symptom of dementia, he said, when I mentioned they had been stealing my money. Patricia put her hand on my shoulder. Dad, nobody has stolen anything. You're confused. It was a perfect performance for any observer, but the hidden cameras were capturing everything. I think a 72-hour evaluation would be beneficial, Dr. Evans said, pulling out a syringe. I just need to administer a mild sedative for the transport. There it was, the crucial moment. Is a sedative really necessary? It's for your safety and the safety of the medical staff, Edward said. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Ray with the agreed-upon code. The facility is compromised. Activate exit protocol immediately. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing up slowly. Of course. Second door on the left. As soon as I was out of sight, I ran for the emergency stairs where Ray was waiting. Did you get it all? Everything. High-definition video of the complete conspiracy, audio of every lie, evidence of the attempt to sedate you against your voluntad. Your children just committed multiple serious felonies in front of our cameras. We left through a back exit just as an ambulance was pulling up to the main entrance. They had planned to take me directly from the office to the home, giving me no chance to change my mind. At 3 a.m., I arrived back at my house for the last time. Edward and Patricia weren't there, probably still out looking for me. I left the letter on the dining room table, along with copies of all the evidence. Then I grabbed my bag and headed for the airport. On the flight to Montreal, I reflected on what I had lost and what I had gained. I had lost 2 children, but I had regained my freedom. I had lost a family, but I had saved my life. Edward and Patricia had planned my end. Instead, I had orchestrated theirs. The flight to Montreal would last 8 hours, enough time for Edward and Patricia to discover the magnitude of what they had lost. As the plane took off, I imagined their faces when they returned home and found my letter on the table. I had chosen Canada for specific reasons. I'd had Canadian citizenship for 10 years, obtained as an investment diversification Mary had suggested. I also had business contacts in Toronto and Vancouver, and most importantly, Canada would make my new life easier without legal complications. During the flight, I mentally reviewed every step of the plan. Ray would have the full video edited and ready to deliver to the authorities as soon as I confirmed my arrival. The lawyers would file criminal charges Monday morning. The plane landed in Montreal at 6:30 a.m. As I walked toward immigration, my phone vibrated with constant calls from Edward and Patricia. I ignored them all. "Welcome home, Mr. Miller," said the immigration officer. Home. The word sounded comforting. At the Four Seasons, I finally turned on my phone. I had 47 missed calls and 23 messages that showed a fascinating progression of emotions. 7:45 p.m. Edward. "Dad, where are you? The doctor's waiting." 8:15 p.m. Patricia. "Dad, please answer. We're worried." 10:45 p.m. Patricia. "What does this letter mean? Call us now." 1:15 a.m. Edward. "We found the letter. We can explain everything." 2:30 a.m. Edward. "The accounts are empty. What did you do?" 4:06 a.m. Edward. "This is kidnapping. We're calling the police." The last message made me laugh. Edward threatening to report his father's vacation as a kidnapping. I called Ray. "Mr. Miller, your children have been calling every half hour. After finding your letter, they went to the police to report you missing. But when the officers checked the bank accounts and discovered you had made the transfers voluntarily, they realized there was no crime." "And then?" "They went to the bank demanding information. When the manager refused without legal authorization, Edward screamed so loud they had to call security." The image of Edward screaming in a bank like a spoiled child was deeply satisfying. "Do you have the video ready?" 4 hours of recording that clearly shows the complete conspiracy. "Shall I proceed with the authorities?" "Proceed." I called Arthur Vance, my lawyer. "Robert, Edward, and Patricia have been calling me since dawn, insisting you've had a mental episode." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I had just received legal documents from you, clearly drafted, modifying your will. Anyone capable of making such detailed legal changes is obviously not suffering from dementia." I also received a call from the DA's office. Someone delivered video evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud and kidnapping. The prosecutors are preparing charges against 4 people, including your children. 4 people. Edward, Patricia, Dr. Evans, and Lucas Cole. "Arthur, I want you to publish an announcement in the major papers." "Saying what?" "Robert Miller announces that he is alive, well, and completely sane. His recent departure was voluntary and planned. He's not lost or in need of rescue." At 2 p.m., I called the hotel where I knew Edward had reservations for business meetings. "Edward Miller?" "Dad, thank God. Where are you?" "Exactly where I need to be. We made mistakes, big mistakes, but we can fix this. Just come back and we'll talk." "Mistakes? Edward, you plan to drug me, kidnap me, steal my money, and bury me alive. Those aren't mistakes. That's a criminal conspiracy." "It wasn't like that. We thought you were really sick. I have recordings of all your emails with Lucas Cole. I know exactly what you planned." A long silence. "What do you want from us?" "No. My family was Mary, and 2 children who died the day they chose to betray me. You 2 are criminals I just happened to know during your childhood." Patricia is crying constantly. She feels terrible. Patricia feels terrible because she lost $20 million, not because she betrayed her father. "What can we do?" "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You made your choice when you decided my money was more important than my life. Now you live with the consequences. You'll face the criminal charges alone, just as you planned for me to face the rest of my life." I hung up before he could answer. That afternoon, walking through the streets of Montreal, I breathed air that felt different. It was the air of freedom, the air of a future that finally belonged to me. My children had planned to bury me. Instead, they had buried themselves. On Monday morning, from my hotel room in Montreal, I received calls from 3 different journalists. The announcement Arthur had published had created exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. Reporters wanted the story of the businessman who had mysteriously vanished. "Mr. Miller," said Karen Riley from the Chicago Tribune, "we have information that you disappeared after a doctor's appointment. Your children reported you missing, insisting you were suffering from dementia. Can you comment?" "I can comment that my children were wrong about many things. My mental health is perfect, as the lawyers who have worked with me on complex legal matters can attest." "Why did you leave without informing your family?" "Because I discovered my family was planning something that would have made it impossible for me to leave later. Everything will become clear when the criminal charges are made public." I called Ray for an update. The charges were filed this morning. Edward Miller, Patricia Miller, Dr. Alan Evans, and Lucas Cole are charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of documents, attempted illegal administration of medication, and conspiracy to kidnap. How did they react? Edward hired the best criminal defense attorney in the city. Patricia fainted when the officers arrived to arrest her at her office. Dr. Evans is denying everything, and Lucas Cole has disappeared. Disappeared? His office says he's out of town on family business. We think he's trying to leave the country. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lucas, the legal architect of the plan to make me disappear, was now a fugitive. What about my children? They're out on bail, but they can't leave the country. Edward lost his job when they heard about the charges. Patricia was fired when the video of her arrest showed up on the news. Can I see that video? Watching my children be arrested was harder than I expected. Despite everything, I had been their father for 25 years, but another part of me felt satisfied, watching justice finally in action. My phone rang. It was Brenda, the housekeeper. Mr. Robert, I need to tell you what happened. Like you asked, I went on Friday night to pick up Mrs. Mary's things. I found Edward and Patricia reading your letter. They were very upset. Did you hear what they were saying? Edward was yelling that you'd lost your mind, that this would prove you needed medical care. Patricia was crying and saying it was all the doctor's fault. Then, an elegant man I didn't know showed up. Edward yelled at him that everything had gone wrong, that you had disappeared with all the money. The man got very angry and told them they owed him a lot of money. Lucas Cole had invested his own money in the plan, expecting to get it back from my assets. Did they see you? No, sir, I hid until they left. Then I gathered Mrs. Mary's things, but, Mr. Robert, I'm scared for you. These men seem dangerous. Brenda, I am completely safe, and you will be too, as long as you don't tell anyone where I am. I miss you and Mrs. Mary. The house feels so empty without you. After hanging up, I sat looking out at Mount Royal. Montreal was beautiful in October, with the trees changing color. It was a city where I could start over, where no one knew my history. My new phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Hayes from the DA's office. We need to talk about the charges against your children. I'm available by phone or video conference. I understand you're in Canada. Is there any possibility you'll return to testify in person? Is my physical presence absolutely necessary? It's not mandatory, but it would be very helpful. Your direct testimony could ensure more severe sentences. More severe sentences. More years in prison for Edward and Patricia. I need time to think about it. Of course, but I want you to know what your children did was particularly cruel. In my 20 years investigating family fraud, I've never seen such a detailed plan to completely destroy a parent's life. That afternoon, as I walked through Montreal, I thought about the letter I had left on the dining room table. Words written in deep pain that had changed everything forever. The letter had been my declaration of independence, my way of telling them that Robert Miller would not be anyone's victim, but it had also been my way of saying goodbye. Brenda had told me Edward and Patricia were very upset when they read it. I wondered what exactly they had felt. Shock at being discovered, fear of the consequences, or maybe for the first time, something like guilt. In that letter, I had written that I hoped their plan had been worth it. Now I knew it hadn't been. They had lost a father, an inheritance, their freedom, their jobs, their reputations, and probably their futures. All for money they never even got to touch. The note on the table had been the end of a 30-year family story, but it had also been the beginning of something new, a life where I could finally trust the people around me, because I had chosen them myself. 3 weeks after my arrival in Montreal, I received a call that would change everything I thought I knew about my children's conspiracy. Mr. Miller, this is Dr. Isabella Reed, an oncologist at St. Gabriel's Hospital. I need to talk to you about something very important we discovered during our investigation. My heart sped up. What kind of discovery? During the police investigation, we reviewed all the medical records related to your case. We found something in Dr. Evans's files that you need to know. What is it? Mr. Miller, we found medical reports showing that you have advanced pancreatic cancer. According to these documents, Dr. Evans diagnosed you 6 months ago, but apparently never informed you. The world stopped. The words repeated in my mind like a distorted echo. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months. Never informed me. That's impossible. I would have realized. I would have had symptoms. Mr. Miller, pancreatic cancer is known as the silent killer because symptoms appear very late. According to the charts, you had occasional fatigue, mild loss of appetite, and some abdominal pain that you attributed to stress. Every symptom resonated with truth. For the past few months, I had noticed subtle changes, but I'd blame them on the grief of losing Mary. Why would Dr. Evans hide this from me? That's the most disturbing part. We found emails between Dr. Evans and your children where they explicitly discussed the diagnosis. Your children asked him not to inform you about the cancer. My children knew I have cancer. Not only did they know, they incorporated it into their plan. According to the emails, they figured that if you died naturally in 6 to 12 months, they would inherit everything without complications. But then they decided that waiting was too risky. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place in the most horrible way. My children hadn't just planned to rob me, they knew I was dying and had decided that even 6 months was too long to wait. Dr. Reed, what is my real prognosis? According to the charts, the cancer is in stage 4. Without treatment, you likely have between 3 and 8 months. With aggressive treatment, we could extend that to 12 or 18 months, possibly 2 years. 2 years, best case scenario. After hanging up, I sat in silence for hours. Everything made sense now. Edward's comments about my health, Patricia's insistence on regular checkups, their urgency to execute the plan. They had been vultures waiting for me to die, but they were too impatient to let nature take its course. I called Ray immediately. Ray, I need you to find out when Edward and Patricia learned about my diagnosis. I explained the revelation. Robert, this changes everything. Now we're talking about conspiracy to accelerate the death of a terminally ill person for the purpose of inheritance. Is that a separate crime? It's multiple crimes, each one more serious. Robert, this could mean life sentences for your children. I didn't sleep that night. I went out walking through Montreal, processing not only that I was dying, but that my children had known and used that information against me. I remembered recent conversations with a new perspective. Edward asking about my retirement plans, Patricia suggesting we should spend more time together while we can. It had all been an act while they waited for me to die. Ray's email arrived at 2 a.m. Robert, I found the emails you were looking for. Your initial diagnosis was in March. Edward and Patricia met with Dr. Evans 2 days later. There are emails discussing whether they should accelerate the natural process or let nature take its course. They decided to intervene because you had started talking about changes to your will, donations to charity, foundations in Mary's name. But there's something else that chilled my blood. I also found evidence that they discussed more direct methods of accelerating your death. There are references to medications that could help the natural process without being detectable in an autopsy. They had considered actively killing me, not just robbing me. My phone rang. It was Patricia, sounding broken, desperate. Dad, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. About the cancer. What about the cancer? We know you found out. The detectives questioned us. Dad, we didn't know what to do about telling you. Dr. Evans said the shock might kill you faster. We told him not to tell you because we wanted to protect you. Lies. Even now, facing criminal charges, Patricia was still lying. Patricia, I read your emails. I know you didn't want to tell me because you thought I might change my will. A long silence. Then, finally, something that sounded like honesty. Yes, that was also a reason. We were scared. We had debts, financial problems. When we found out about the cancer, we thought it was a solution to all our problems. My death was a solution to your problems? We didn't say that. We never said that. You didn't have to say it, Patricia. You planned it. We're in pretrial detention. Edward lost his license. I lost my job. Our lives are destroyed. Your lives are destroyed because you chose to destroy mine first. Is there anything we can do? Any way to fix this? Yes, Patricia, you can face the consequences of your decisions like the adults you pretend to be. That night, I finally understood the complete irony. My children had conspired to accelerate my death for money. Instead, they had accelerated the destruction of their own lives, and I, the man who was supposed to die in silence, now had the power to decide exactly how much they would suffer for what they had done. The hidden truth had revealed that the betrayal was even worse than I'd imagined, but it had also given me perspective on what really mattered in the time I had left. The cancer diagnosis changed everything. I didn't just know I was dying. I knew that every day I had left was a gift my children had tried to steal. Revenge was no longer just about justice. It was about reclaiming control of the time I had left. I called Detective Hayes from Montreal. "Detective, I'm ready to return to testify." "Are you sure? We know about your medical diagnosis. No one would expect you to make this trip." "That's precisely why I have to. My children planned all of this knowing I'm dying. I want a judge and jury to hear from my own voice what they tried to do to me." "The trial will begin in 2 weeks. Will you be physically prepared?" I looked out the window at the Quebec mountains. For the past few weeks, I had started to feel more pronounced symptoms: fatigue, weight loss, abdominal pain, but my mind was still completely clear. I'll be prepared. The flight back to Chicago was surreal. I was returning not to reunite with my family, but to testify against them. But I was also returning with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Ray picked me up at the airport. "The additional charges related to concealing your diagnosis have been filed. Edward and Patricia are now facing the possibility of 30 years in prison each." "How have they reacted?" "Edward is still maintaining it was all a misunderstanding, but his story falls apart when confronted with the emails about accelerating your death." "And Patricia?" "Patricia is cooperating completely. Her lawyer is negotiating a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Edward and the other conspirators." Patricia was betraying Edward just as they had both tried to betray me. There was a poetic justice in that. Her testimony is devastating, Robert. She describes in detail how Edward orchestrated everything, how he pressured Dr. Evans to hide your diagnosis, even how they considered more direct methods to accelerate your death. More direct methods? According to Patricia, Edward researched medications that could worsen your condition without being detectable. He spoke with a pharmacist about drugs that could help the natural process. They tried to actively kill me. It wasn't just negligence or financial conspiracy. It was premeditated attempted murder. Do we have evidence? Recorded conversations between Edward and the pharmacist. The pharmacist got nervous and decided to record their conversations as legal protection. The night before the trial, Patricia called me from jail. "Dad, tomorrow's going to be horrible for all of us." "It's going to be horrible for you. For me, it's going to be liberating." Liberating. "For months, I've carried the guilt of having failed as a father. Tomorrow, a jury will hear exactly what kind of people you became, and they will understand it wasn't my fault. Testifying against us won't bring back your health. It won't change the fact that you're dying. No, Patricia, but it will ensure that when I die, it's on my own terms, not on the terms you planned for me." "What do you mean?" "You planned for me to die alone, abandoned in an institution, after being robbed and betrayed. That would have been your perfect revenge against me." "We never wanted revenge." "Of course you did. Revenge for being an absent father, revenge for having worked so much, revenge for having loved your mother more than I loved you." A long silence. Finally, Patricia spoke in a voice that sounded like the little girl she had once been. "Yes, we were angry with you, for all those reasons, and you decided to punish me in the cruelest way possible." "Yes." It was the first honest admission I had heard. "Well, Patricia, tomorrow you're going to discover that my revenge is much more perfect than yours." "What revenge?" "You plan to destroy my life in secret. My revenge is going to be completely public. The entire country is going to know exactly what kind of people you are. You will carry that shame for the rest of your lives, and the most beautiful part is that while you spend the next 20 years in prison, I'm going to spend my last months completely free. Free of you, free of your manipulations. You're free of any obligation to love you. Don't you love us anymore? The man who loved you died the night I discovered your plan. You killed that man just as efficiently as you tried to kill me. The day of the trial, I arrived early. The media had turned the case into a national sensation. The businessman who uncovered his children's conspiracy was the headline in every paper. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Edward and Patricia with their lawyers. Edward looked at me with hatred and desperation. Patricia kept her gaze down, but I looked directly at them, without blinking, without emotion. They were strangers now, criminals who just happened to share my DNA. My testimony lasted 4 hours. I recounted every detail of their betrayal, every email, every lie, every moment of their performance. I described how they planned to drug and kidnap me. I explained how they had hidden my medical diagnosis to use my death as part of their financial plan. The jury looked at them with growing horror. Some had tears in their eyes as I described the plan to bury me alive in a mental institution. When I finished, I looked directly at Edward and Patricia one last time. "Your Honor," I said to the judge, "these individuals killed my family as efficiently as if they had used poison. They killed something more valuable than my body. They killed my ability to trust, to love, to believe in human goodness. I hope the justice served reflects the magnitude of what they destroyed." The perfect revenge wasn't sending them to prison. It was freeing myself completely from them while I still had time to enjoy that freedom. When I left the courthouse, I breathed air that tasted different. It was the air of a man who had finally closed the most painful chapter of his life. Edward and Patricia had planned my end. Instead, I had orchestrated theirs. 6 months after the trial, I am writing these lines from a small house facing a lake in Quebec, Canada. My study windows look out over crystal clear water that reflects the Laurentian Mountains. It's a place where no one knows me as the man whose children betrayed him, but simply as Robert, the quiet writer who lives at the end of the path. Edward was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Patricia received 15 years for cooperating with the prosecution. Dr. Evans lost his medical license and received 10 years. Lucas Cole was extradited from the Cayman Islands and sentenced to 20 years. All 4 appealed. All appeals were rejected. I have not spoken with Edward since the day of his sentencing. Patricia wrote me a letter 3 months ago asking for forgiveness and hoping for a reconciliation before I died. The letter remains unopened in my desk drawer. Some wounds are too deep to heal, and some betrayals too complete to forgive. My cancer is progressing as the doctors predicted. I decided not to undergo aggressive treatments that would have given me a few extra months but would have robbed me of the quality of those months. Instead, I chose palliative care and time to do the things I'd never had a chance to do. I wrote a book, not about my experience with my children, but about Mary, about our love, our dreams, the beautiful years we spent together. It was called Letters to Mary, A Love That Transcends, and it became a bestseller in the US and Canada. The royalties go entirely to a foundation I established to help seniors who are victims of family abuse. I learned French. At 51, with terminal cancer, I decided to master a language I'd always wanted to speak. I dream in French now, occasionally, and I can read Quebec poetry in its original language. I made real friends for the first time in decades, people who met me without knowing anything about my money or my family history. Claude, the town baker, who teaches me how to make croissants on Sundays. Marguerite, the retired librarian, with whom I discuss French literature over tea. Jean-Pierre, the local fisherman, who takes me out on his boat and tells me stories of his youth. These people love me for who I am, not for what I can give them. It's a kind of love I never experienced with my children, not even when they were small, because there were always transactions involved, expectations, subtle manipulations. I fell in love again. Her name is Amélie Dubois. She's a widow, 48, and she's the doctor who manages my palliative care. We met professionally, but gradually we developed a friendship that turned into something deeper. She knows I'm dying. I know she's willing to love a terminally ill man because she understands that time doesn't determine the depth of a feeling. "Robert," she said a few weeks ago as we walked the path by the lake, "do you ever regret finding out what your children were planning? Would it have been easier to have died without knowing the truth?" "No," I answered after thinking carefully. "It would have been easier, but it wouldn't have been truly living. The last months of my life have been more authentic than the previous 10 years. But don't you miss having a family? Amelie, family isn't just blood. Family is the people who choose to love you when they have no obligation to. You, Claude, Marguerite, Jean-Pierre, you are all more family to me than Edward and Patricia ever were. It's true. This small community I've built in Quebec has given me more genuine love in 6 months than I received from my biological children in 25 years. Yesterday, I received a call from Arthur Vance. Robert, Patricia is applying for early parole for good behavior. Part of the process requires a victim statement. Yes, I replied immediately. I want to make a statement. That statement said simply, Patricia Miller has served 18 months of a 15-year sentence. I have served 18 months of a death sentence. The difference is that my sentence was not chosen by me, while hers was thoroughly deserved. If she can change as a person in 18 months, I can die in peace, knowing some good came from this tragedy. But if her request is just another manipulation, then the system must protect other vulnerable parents from someone capable of such calculated betrayal. The request was denied. This morning, as I write, I feel a deep tranquility I haven't known in years. My body is gradually weakening, but my spirit feels stronger than ever. Edward and Patricia thought they could write the end of my story. They were completely wrong. I wrote my own ending, an ending where love triumphs over betrayal, where freedom defeats control, where authentic family surpasses biological ties. When my time comes, I will die surrounded by people who genuinely love me. I will die having experienced adventures I never thought possible. I will die knowing I took control of my destiny and lived it on my own terms. Edward and Patricia planned to bury me alive. Instead, they gave me the inadvertent gift of teaching me how to truly live. The sun is rising over the Laurentian Lake as I write what will be my final lines. Amelie will be here soon for breakfast. Claude saved me fresh croissants. Marguerite lent me a new book of poetry. It's a new dawn, and perhaps one of my last, but it is mine, completely mine. It's been 18 months since I escaped the trap my children had set. 18 months of authentic life that have been worth more than all the previous years of empty existence. My cancer has progressed as the doctors predicted, but my spirit has never been more free. Yesterday, I received a final call from Arthur Vance. Robert, I have news about Patricia. His voice was somber. What happened? She was found dead in her cell this morning. Apparently it was suicide. She left a note. The impact was unexpected. Despite everything that had happened, Patricia had been my daughter for 25 years. What did the note say? Just one line. Dad was right about everything? I stayed silent for a long moment. Patricia had found her own way out, but not to freedom, to the final void. Part of me felt sad for the little girl she had been. Another part felt that justice had taken its full course. And Edward? Still serving his sentence. When he heard about Patricia's death, he asked to speak with you. I told him it was your decision. No, I answered without hesitation. I have nothing left to say to Edward, and he has nothing I need to hear. That conversation made me reflect on the concept of perfect justice. I had sought revenge, but what I had found was something more valuable: complete freedom from the people who had tried to control my destiny. During these months in Quebec, I have learned what it means to truly live. Every morning I wake up without the burden of false family expectations. Every day is filled with small, authentic pleasures, genuine conversations, laughter without ulterior motives, love that is given freely without expecting anything in return. The Mary Miller True Love Foundation has helped over 1,000 seniors who were victims of family abuse. Every month I receive letters from people who have escaped situations similar to mine, finding strength in my story. My book is still a bestseller, and the proceeds continue to help others facing family betrayals. But more important than the external impact has been my personal transformation. I have learned that true family is chosen, not inherited. I have discovered that authentic love is given without expecting anything back. I have understood that the most perfect revenge is to live so fully that those who tried to destroy you become irrelevant. Amelie enters my study with coffee and her morning smile. How did you wake up, mon amour? Better than ever. I answer, and it's true. Every day I wake up is a day my children couldn't take from me, a day I've chosen to live completely. Did you finish writing? Yes. The story is complete. She comes over and reads over my shoulder. Are you going to publish this story too? No, I say, closing the laptop. This story is just for me, to remember how I got here and to fully understand what I've gained. We go out to the garden, where Jean-Pierre is already prepping his boat for our morning trip on the lake. Claude arrives with a basket of fresh-baked croissants. Marguerite appears with tea and the book of poetry she promised to lend me. These are my chosen ones, my true family. People who love me for who I am, not for what I can give them. People who have enriched my last months more than my children enriched decades of my life. As we cruise across the lake, I think of Mary. I know she would be proud of the decisions I've made, proud that I finally learned to distinguish between real love and manipulation, proud that I found the courage to choose my own happiness over toxic family expectations. The water reflects the mountains and the perfect blue sky. It's a perfect metaphor for my life now, clear, serene, reflecting only beauty. Robert, Jean-Pierre says as he steers the boat, do you ever regret leaving your old life? Never, I answer without hesitation. The life I left behind wasn't really life. It was an existence conditioned by fear, guilt, and false obligations. This life, even knowing it will be short, is infinitely more valuable. In the afternoon, as Amélie and I walk the path by the lake, she takes my hand. Robert, are you afraid? Of dying? No. I've lived more authentically in these months than in the 50 years before. When my time comes, it will be the end of a life truly lived, not the escape from an empty existence. I love you, she says simply. And I love you, Amélie. More than I thought possible to love after everything I went through. That night, as I get ready for bed, I reflect on the entire journey. Robert Miller, the businessman betrayed by his children, died the night he discovered their conspiracy. Robert, the writer who lives by the lake in Quebec, was born from the ashes of that betrayal. Edward and Patricia believed they could determine my end. They were completely wrong. They wrote their own destruction while I wrote my freedom. The most perfect revenge wasn't sending them to prison. It was discovering that I could be completely happy without them. It was learning that real love exists and that it's never too late to find it. Tomorrow will be another day of authentic life, another day of real love, genuine friendship, and true purpose. Another day that no one can take from me because I have chosen it myself. And that makes all the difference in the world. The new dawn isn't just about the sun rising over the lake. It's about waking up every day knowing that I am completely free, completely loved, and completely alive. For the first and last time in my existence, I am truly happy.